So let's look at, or let's continue the discussion on human life and language again. Before this, I just mentioned how we should appreciate linguistics as a discipline. And now let's see how its history has been discussed in the literature. Um, to the Greeks are the ones who should be given a lot of credit for putting language at the forefront as far as academic research is concerned or the grammar is concerned. So initially it started as a traditional grammar studies, and the Greeks were the pioneers. They were the leaders in this field. And one good thing that the Greeks had is that they had this gift of wondering at things that other people would take it for granted. Let's say a non-Greek person would think that, okay, it's language, it's fine, it happened to us, and then they didn't really, like, we don't really think much about it. But the Greeks had this inherent inquisitive attitude, which actually helped them to contribute a lot to the human learning. So they were wondering at things, why language has been like that. And a good thing that they did so firmly is that they speculated persistently and boldly about history, origin, and development of language. No other civilization or no other community was that strong or that bold enough to talk about the history, origin, and development language. It's the Greeks who actually should get the credit. However, there was a tiny limitation, and this tiny limitation was ancient Greeks, they studied, but they studied only their language. They didn't study anything else because the communication system was not as wide as you see nowadays. It was good old time in a sense, but then considering they didn't have any access to any other language at that particular time, the Greek scholars, what they did, they studied their own language. As a result, or as an upshot, so what happens? The structure of Greek was considered to be the universal form of human thought, which is not right, which is not correct. The universe is not restricted, or the universe was not restricted or limited to Greeks only. However, the scholars, since they studied their language, there was an assumption that all the human languages or all the human thoughts, that's kind of concentrated on how the Greeks think or how the Greeks interpret. So that's a drawback or a limitation that Greeks had. But the good thing that they did is that they studied language in the most thorough manner. Up until 18th century, the Greek generalizations about language, they could not be improved upon because there was hardly any language research, linguistics research, or there were hardly any interest or inquisitiveness about language. I have to reiterate it all the time. Considering language is so common to us, it happens to all of us. All of us, we use some language or the other. We tend to take it for granted. So all these Greek generalizations, they could not be worked on or they could not be improved until 18th century. However, eventually what happened, the scholars, they started working more on it, and they ceased to view language as a direct gift of God. Not really. It hasn't come to us from the God. That's not the scientific way of thinking about it. Rather, there are multiple theories which deals with the origin of it, for that matter. During the medieval period, whenever you were talking about any language, primarily classical Latin was there at the forefront because it appeared in the books. So Latin was one of the most powerful languages. And Renaissance happened, then there was Middle Age, then there was revival of Greek learning, Hebrew and Arabic also got added. So these are the classical languages, these are the oldest languages which have given us a lot of information about language structure. So whatever contribution we see in linguistics now, a major chunk of its credit actually goes to the Greek scholars, Hebrew scholars, and Arabic scholars who studied their own languages extensively and thoroughly. That actually helped the new generation researchers to take language in a more serious way. And the drawback or the limitation is that such kind of an exploration, this era of exploration actually brought superficial knowledge of many languages. So people didn't really go into much detailing. So the languages remained, or the study of language, that remained at a very superficial level. And now let's look at it, how the languages came into contact with each other, how they influenced each other, and how the world came to know about each other's language. Primarily, the travelers should be given the credit. So they brought the vocabularies. So the travelers from one place to the other, from one continent to the other, they are the ones who who helped languages to grow, who helped languages to get new vocabulary. And a major role that missionaries played in 18th century, they translated religious books into local languages. That's one of the finest things that they could do for bringing recognition to the local languages. Their intention was different. Their intention was related to religion. But in the process, a lot of local languages could get a lot of attention. And some of the missionaries, they also started compiling grammars of the local languages. They started writing dictionaries of exotic indigenous languages. So that is one of the most wonderful things that the missionaries could do to bring recognition to the local or to the indigenous languages, for that matter. And in this connection, I would actually like to highlight the contribution of the Spanish press. It started in early 16th century for many American and Filipino languages. So the press from Spain, considering they translated the sacred texts into the local American languages and Philippine languages, they also wrote grammars, they also wrote dictionaries. So that helped a lot of Philippine languages to be or to get recognition at the world front. Then the travelers also did their share of work. They contributed in their own way. With the increase of commerce and trade, it actually led to the compilation of grammars and dictionaries. So the grammars and dictionaries, more languages were identified, or more languages came into the knowledge of the people, knowledge of the humans. So the travelers contributed a lot to it, and because of that, as a result, a lot of grammars there's a lot of compilation of grammars as well as the dictionaries, and this helped, or something that actually contributed immensely to this process is Renaissance. So because of Renaissance, a lot of scholars, they showed interest, and they tried to document, or they tried to study the older records of their own language, the literary evidence that they had, or the literary texts that they had, they actually started studying. So that's all about history of linguistics, a very brief history. There is more into it. It's just a symbolic thing that I discussed to acknowledge the contribution of Europe, or to acknowledge the contribution of West to this discipline called linguistics. And I'll move to the Indian languages, or India as a linguistic area, a little later. But then for the moment, let's see what are the different language groups that we have. You remember I showed you that picture. So here is a snapshot of that. So I've kind of written 3 major languages that belong to European language family. We have Germanic group, which includes languages like English, Dutch, German, Danish, and Swedish. Then we have Romance group, which has French, Italian, and Spanish. Then we have Slavic group, which has Russian, Polish, Bohemian, and Serbian languages. So then the question arises, why English, German, and Dutch, they are put in the Germanic category, French and Spanish are in the Romance category, and Russian and Polish in the Slavic category. So what's the reason why these are the languages which have been put together? This is the intention, or this is the aim of any linguistics course that approaches it from a typological perspective. So what is the Germanic type? What is the Romance type? And what is the Slavic type? So at the very beginning, I will tell you, these groups are formed due to the close morphological resemblance that they have. So the words have similar structures, or similar forms, or similar pronunciation sometimes, or similar sounds. They do host similar sounds. So because of the close morphological resemblance that they have, these are the languages that have been put together in one category. And when Europe, when I just said Europe contributed a lot, or the West contributed a lot to the study of linguistics. However, in the oriental part of the world, in the eastern world, we had India, and India arose a body of knowledge which actually brought a huge revolution in European ideas about linguistic analysis. We had this ancient literary texts, the Vedas, and which were written in Sanskrit. They contributed immensely to the field of language study. So that's how the Indic tradition evolved, and we have Panini, who is considered to be the founder of modern linguistic studies, and his Sanskrit text, like his Sanskrit grammar, which is known as Ashtadhyay. I'll talk about it later maybe. So that that gives a lot of, or that helps us to find out a lot of things about Indic languages in general and languages kind of as a whole. So or Indic languages in particular and languages in general. So if I go back to the big L and then the small l. So the European scholars, they took it up from Panini's contribution in Sanskrit. And if you look at the Greek tradition, here are a few informations. You can simply have a look at it. Protagoras was credited with the distinction of 3 genders in English. Plato, he distinguished between the nouns and the verbs. Also, the definitions are different. So when Plato defines nouns and verbs, his definitions are going to be different from the general understanding or the common understanding of nouns and verbs. So for Plato, nouns are the terms that could function in sentences as the subjects of subjects of predication. But not all subjects, not all nouns can be or should be treated as subjects of predication, not necessarily. There are also non-subject predications which can also be nouns. Similar is the case with verbs. So for Plato, verbs are the terms which could express the action or quality is predicated over there. So in a way it's okay. So generally the verbs, they do express action, but not all verbs actually express action. We have the non-action verbs, the verbs like copula, or the verbs like the auxiliary verbs or the helping verbs, will, shall, is, am, are. So these are not really the action-centric verbs. There are verbs which talk about emotions. So then how about those? So not all the verbs always talk about or always related to action. So Plato's definition got changed later, but if you think about the contemporary society at that point of time, this was one of the biggest achievements that the philosophers had, if you consider language as a systematic study, or a language as a tool of systematic study. And please note, there are 2 different things. These 2 logical definitions, or these 2 independent grammatical categories like noun and verb, they were kind of considered, they were made on logical sense. And eventually what happened, the more the newer grammatical categories were added, and adjectives are one of them. So to begin with, nouns were introduced, then the verbs were introduced, and finally we got the adjectives, and now we have 5 other parts of speech which are part of this grammar. And these are just a few things about the Greek tradition I'm going to talk about. I did discuss about Protagoras and Plato. Then we have Aristotle, whose contribution is that he added conjunctions. I told you, from nouns to verbs to adjectives. Then we added conjunctions. So Aristotle actually found out a separate category, or he identified a separate category which are available in human language, and that would be the added conjunctions. So he actually added the conjunctions in the list of linguistic items. And the other thing that he did, he also categorized tense. So tense as a system in any human language was predicted or was compiled or was composed of um, in the human system or in the language system primarily by Aristotle. So now we got how many different kinds of linguistic items? We got nouns, we got verbs, we get adjectives, conjunctions, and also tense got introduced as a linguistic item. Then we had the Stoic philosophers who gave most attention to language through logic. Instead of identifying the independent, let's say, categories in linguistics or in language studies, they focused on the philosophy of language. And then we had the Alexandrian scholars, followed by the Stoics. They added categories like adverbs, participles, pronouns, and prepositions. So the entire study of language that took a systematic shape. And please note what is shown in the slide. It's written as it's mentioned in red color. So it's Dionysius Thrax that is the first published comprehensive and systematic grammatical description of the Western world. So that's the first thing, which actually talked about all these kinds of parts of speech, and it's a most compiled version. So from there, we'll move to this was all about the Greek tradition, which influenced a lot to the study of language or linguistics as a discipline. Then we'll move to the Indic traditions. So in the Indic traditions, you have these are what I was talking about. It's Greek plus Roman. So we would say Greco-roman tradition. However, the Indic tradition was very unique. It was independent. It was different from the Greco-Roman traditions. Not only different, it's also independent. So as I mentioned a while ago, I would focus more on Panini here. It's assumed that Panini was there in 4th century BC, though there's a little controversy around it, but then let's consider it as it is. And he was the chief architect of Indic linguistic tradition. Not only Indic linguistics, the entire linguistic tradition, if you think about, Panini has a lot to contribute. So what it did, just like the Greek tradition, Panini also recognized more parts of speeches like prepositions and particles. So this prepositions and particles, it brought new dimensions to the linguistic study. And he also, and most importantly, we must be very clear about it. It's Panini who actually gave us an idea that sounds in a language should also be studied carefully. We should not just focus on the words or morphemes or sentences, rather sounds also acquire, or sounds must acquire, a relevant position to be studied carefully, because the internal structure of the words that get decided by the study of sound. So that is how, that's the reason why we keep Panini at a superior position than the Greco-Roman scholars. However, I must tell you that this study, which was done in the early, let's say, 4th century BC, caught the attention of the world only by the Western scholars. So this discovery of Sanskrit grammar, it was rediscovered in that sense, or it was brought into the foreground by the Western scholars, and that paved the way to the study of Indic tradition, or to the study of comparative philology. So from when I say comparative philology, I'm primarily I'm going to discuss, or I'm going to talk about how to compare between the Greek tradition and then the Indic tradition. We just had an idea about how Greek-Roman or Greco-Roman, to put it in a more sort of comprehensive manner, works for linguistics as a discipline, and then we'll move to the Indic tradition. I have already given you bits and pieces of informations. Now let's look at how the Indic tradition works and what is the contribution of Indic tradition. in studying language in a systematic and scientific manner. When I say Indic tradition, it's primarily the Hindu tradition, where the grammarians extended their interest from the scriptures to Sanskrit, which is considered to be an upper caste language, because it's only the Brahmins who had this privilege to use this language in the day-to-day discourse. So what is the next contribution of Indic tradition? The descriptive rules are formed, like scholars who were working on grammars of Sanskrit, they tried to frame, or they tried to they definitely tried to frame the descriptive rules, and they identified the independent and individual parts of speeches, and they were studied more carefully than ever before. And this is the timeline as shown on the slide, 352 to 50 BC, and this is considered to be hosting greatest monuments of human intelligence. So, a lot of wonderful contribution happened to which actually enriched human learning and human knowledge. And as I have just mentioned a while ago, knowledge of Sanskrit reached Europe through missionaries in 16th and 17th century. And one of the most noted linguists who gets a lot of credit is Sir William Jones. He stated that Sanskrit, Latin and Greek, they are contemporary languages, and this claim was one of the tallest claims of the contemporary time. And he also made another very bold statement, and his claim was that all the three languages, Sanskrit, Latin and Greek, they have sprung from the same common source which no longer exists. We call it the proto-language. So, all the three languages, they have the same ancestor. So, the ancestry is the proto-language that has contributed to the vocabulary or the lexical system of all the three languages that we have listed here. And to help you with understanding what is Panini's contribution or what are Paninian principles, I will not go into much detailing. I will just give you three different phrases which are extremely significant when you try to understand Panini's works. First thing that you must note is Panini talked about, or Panini discussed, exhaustiveness. So, when I say exhaustiveness, if you look at the slide, it is written within the limits which it sets itself. That means Panini claimed that language is exhaustive, grammatical system is exhaustive. You do not, it is self-sufficient. To study grammar, you just need to understand grammar, that is it. You do not have to have any other tool to analyze such a system. And he also emphasized a lot on consistency. So, the grammar system or the grammatical system remains consistent always. So, what does it mean? That means there is no contradiction between different parts of the total statement. So, when you utter a total statement like I am going to school, it remains consistent as far as the meaning is concerned, no matter in which way you try to analyze it. The meaning of I am going to school is always the same, so it remains consistent. So, if it is a total statement, you have to consider it, or you have to take it, or you have to analyze it as a whole. And when you analyze it as a whole, there has not been any change. And finally, the third point that I want to highlight in the Indic tradition in Paninian school is he emphasized on economy of grammar. So, what do we mean by economy of grammar? In this system, we actually, being humans, or the human language, the system of human language always tends to the economization of it. So, that is why we use a lot of abbreviations, and we also use a lot of symbols. So, that gives us an idea. Being humans, we always tend towards, or we are always inclined towards the economy of any given language. For that matter, I would say big L, or the human language. So, that is all about Indic tradition. So, in this class, we primarily had some discussion. Let's try to wind it up now. So, we started the discussion with the history of language and linguistics as a discipline, how the Greeks studied it, how the Romans studied it, how Greco-Roman tradition evolved as a steady, strong, bold discipline which put language at the forefront. Then the other side of the world, we had the Indic tradition where Panini contributed immensely to the study of language. And then what is the uniqueness and what is the major contribution that Panini had? Primarily the sound system was highlighted, which was not studied as carefully as it was done by Panini before. However, Paninian contribution actually got a lot of recognition only by the Western scholars. So up until William Jones and other Western scholars, they started working on the linguistic issues or the studies related to language, surrounding language. Paninian tradition was not much significant to the world. But once it has been once it has been rediscovered, or once it has been put at the forefront, a lot of related disciplines or a lot of related claims came into existence, which is why we had a claim like Latin and Sanskrit. They sprung from the same language, which could be a proto language. So this kind of bold statements or this kind of strong statements opened up many new avenues for linguistics research. All of them, I must say, would be a part of the linguistic typology, because when I'm trying to approach this course as a typological entity or as a typological framework, from a typological framework, I must talk about what are the different types of languages available here and how do you decide which language belongs to which type. So that's the reason why we not only should we appreciate linguistics as a discipline, we also appreciate typology as a tool when you are trying to understand the issues related to language and linguistics. So thank you. I'll talk about Indo-European tradition in the next session. Thank you.